Welcome back to Let's Be Blunt with Montel. I'm your host, Montel Williams, and this is the podcast where we cover all things and anything cannabis, from policy to culture to personal stories to those shaping this incredible industry. Today, we're lighting it up with a guest whose name is synonymous with cannabis excellence and sustainability. For the past 20 plus years, he's grown the Emerald Cup from a small Mendocino County gathering of farmers into one of the most respected cannabis competitions and cultural festivals in the world. Whether you're a connoisseur, a grower, or just somebody curious about cannabis, this is an episode that you're not going to want to miss. So joining us today is none other than Mr. Tim Blake, activist, entrepreneur, and founder of the Emerald Cup. Tim has dedicated his life to championing sustainable farming, small-scale growers, and the evolving culture surrounding the cannabis plant. More than just cannabis, Tim blends wellness, community, and even interstellar curiosity into everything he does. Stick around, folks, because this is going to be a really great one. Tim, welcome to the show. Thank you for being part of Let's Be Blunt with Montel.
It's a pleasure to be here. I'm honored to speak with you, Montel.
The honor is all mine, my friend. So seriously, thank you so much for being here with us. We really enjoy having you here, and I know our listeners are just as excited as I am to learn more about you and the powerhouse movement that you've been able to build, the Emerald Cup. But before we get into that, let's rewind a little bit and go back and talk a little bit about the cannabis world. You were about 14 years old when you actually got involved with cannabis. Take us back to those early days and what drew you into cannabis, and how did that passion evolve into where you are today?
Well, in seventh grade, I went to Catholic school, and I was lucky that we had one Hispanic kid, Tony Del Rosa, and he turned me on to cannabis at like 13 years old. That was in the Bay Area in San Jose. My family moved to Santa Cruz, Capitola, the following year. And I was living on the beach in Capitola, and my dad was a lawyer. My mom was an artist. And the next thing you know, all the hippies in Capitola and Santa Cruz were coming over to my parents' house. I started getting cannabis from all of them, and I started dealing as a sophomore in high school through all those older kids who were like, 18 to 23. So I started dealing when I was 14, going to SoCal High School, selling a kilo every Friday, which back then was a kilo. It was 2.2, so you got 34 ounces. We sold like 30, kept 4 for ourselves, and went and partied all weekend. It was an idyllic life for a kid in the 60s or early 70s.
Wow. And then, that just continued to evolve while you're through school and you just really got into cannabis? Or what made you say, I think I'm going to try to do something a little different and build this empire?
Well, I was a hyperactive kid. So when I got to cannabis, I was so thankful because I probably would have been put on Ritalin or something else. So I realized it was my medicine very early on. As I went to school and started dealing more and more, the people I was working for, my dad was a major attorney. So they thought if they worked with me, he'd help them if they ever had problems. And so I learned that out later. So I started working for these people who turned out to be the titans of the industry. We're talking the early 70s. People were coming back from Thailand, from South America with small amounts of cannabis that quickly turned into a huge operation in just a few short years. They were bringing in Thai sticks, which are on sticks. They realized they could take them off those sticks, turn them into sensimilla, bring them back, and they started bringing back millions of pounds of stickless Thai by the late 70s, which ran right through the mid 80s. So it was a gigantic industry that I grew up in.
And the Emerald Cup was kind of recognized as the Academy Awards of Cannabis. When did you decide, I got some good stuff. Let's see if anybody else has good stuff. I'm going to put this together and make an award out of it. When did the cup come? When did that cup idea begin?
Well, I went through the 80s and 90s dealing. I moved out of Santa Cruz and came up to Mendocino after I got busted, excuse me, and started doing indoor operations up here. Most people don't realize most of the cannabis grown in the Emerald Triangle through the 90s anywhere in early 2000s was mostly indoor because they brought the DEA and camp in and really pounded not only the international cannabis trade, but the sun-grown cannabis trade in the Emerald Triangle. So we fought that through the 90s, and in the early 2000s, I was sitting around with some friends and we were talking, and we said, you know what, we want to enjoy the friendly competition and the celebration like you do at the county fairs across the country. Because I grew up loving that. Back in the early days, before we had video and YouTube and all the rest of it, we went to the county fairs and did simple things in life. So we decided we were just going to go for it. That was 7 years before High Times came in. Nobody was doing a public event. And we just basically balls it up and did a public cannabis competition. It was quiet, but we had a couple hundred people, 24 entries, and people couldn't believe we weren't arrested.
That is crazy. I mean, looking a little deeper, I mean, beyond just the entries and the awards, the Cannabis Cup, I mean, the Emerald Cup has kind of taken on a new meaning all of itself for the industry. I mean, why do you think this platform is so critical?
Well, we started off as one friendly sun-grown competition. There were no vendors, no sponsors. It was just a friendly competition amongst all the local growers. That evolved into where we had almost 50 competitions. We had 117 judges. Last year, we had 611 entries. And it's become the standard for the industry across the board, not only with sun-grown, but every aspect of cannabis. And it's been recognized as the fairest and the best cannabis competition in the world.
Yeah, I mean, it's a competition that's not only about potency and flavor, aroma, or something. I mean, what are your judges judging when they actually open the competition up? Are they looking at the visual aspects? They're looking at all. I mean, what?
It was really simple in the early days because we just put a very simple scoring system together. It was a 50-point score for the flowers, 10 for the looks, 10 for the taste, 10 for the smell, and a double score for the high. So it was weighted towards the high. It's very interesting because that's how we started. And back in the days, it was the OG and the gases and the strong cannabis that people were really looking for. Over the last 20 years, that's evolved to where it was mostly males in the beginning that were judges. We really have balanced that out. We've got people from every spectrum that have come in through the judging. And so we've really created a different scoring system because we incorporated indoor and mixed light and third-party certified. So you have all these different categories just within the flower competitions. And with the flower competition, we realized that you really needed to judge it not just going up against the high, but against the terpene profiles and the various flavors and tastes and the effects. And so we really evolved a different judging system to reflect that going through the terpene profiles. So now we judge the flowers based upon the terpene profiles. They all get awards, but then we bring it back together for a top 20, basically with all the terpene profiles going against each other. But we have so many other contests with the topicals and edibles and the rest of it that they all have different scoring systems as well.
That's crazy. I mean, now it's very interesting when you're talking about, driving the industry to make them understand what terpenes are all about when it comes to the overall quality of cannabis and how they affect the consumer. I mean, was that kind of a shock to the industry when you first started doing that?
Well, yeah, there's some people that have really, Kevin Jodry with the terp contest he did at Humboldt had started it. But most people go into the dispensaries and they're looking for the highest THC and the best bang for their buck. And we really wanted to re-educate people into really looking for the right type of medicine for themselves. And so we really pushed that. We worked with SC Labs and Mark Lewis. We came up with this scoring system. And the first year we did that, it was the most asked question from the media was, what are you doing here? And we were like, look, we're really trying to get people out of the highest THC and looking for the balanced cannabinoid system that works best for them. And so it's been a really wonderful thing to promote and educate people on.
That's great because, I mean, I think that's spread now pretty much across the industry. And I know one of the things that you've said before is that, you think that, and just like I've been saying this now for over 20 years, I think anybody who gravitates to cannabis has gravitated to cannabis because of a underlying, I say, medicinal reason. And what I mean by medicinal is like if somebody decides that they want to use cannabis over alcohol because they want to relax, I think that's medicinal. If they want to get better rest, they want to get better sleep, they want to lose a little anxiety. All those things to me are medical. I mean, and terpenes play such a significant role in that.
I got cancer about 20 years ago. I was, weakened with my immune system. I got cancer. I was using cannabis oils. And then I started using the beginnings of CBD when we first started talking about that. And so I've interacted and worked with cannabis closely on a very medicinal way, although all cannabis is medicinal, but for my specific illnesses for the past 20 years. And so I've really been able to see how well it does work. When I first heard about this, I thought, most of it's kind of fake so we can justify cannabis. But as I used it for my skin cancers and my various ailments, I've really come to understand over the years how critical it is as a medicine. for all of us, and how much people should really integrate it into their individual lives on a daily basis in any way needed.
And that's so significant that you then outline the terpenes and you give awards for terpenes, because that also gives insights to growers about how they can optimize their profiles when it comes to terpenes, helping patients and individuals select something that's better for them, right?
Well, yeah, you know what? Back in the day, back 20 years ago, everybody was looking for the OG. If you didn't have an OG or a Chem Dog or a Sour Diesel, which are the heavy THC gas strains, you couldn't sell anything. When that changed, all of a sudden we had cookies come in. You had the cookies cultivar come in. We had in the pines a pineapple, which is more along the lines of that Jack strain, and that came in, and all of a sudden people really took notice and went, wow, there's something besides the high we can look at. Let's look at these different strains. Because when I grew up, if you had a Jack Herrera or if you had a Awesomine type cultivar, you couldn't sell it. People would smell it and immediately go, this isn't strong enough, we're not going to buy it. It had to smell
just what you're saying that. I mean, I can remember I'll tell you something. I've literally been an activist in this space since really 2001. And I can recall that, in the Bay Area, I had several growers up there who literally would give me some of their higher CBD, higher minor cannabinoid laden products. Now, remember back then, we weren't getting really good COAs, but we were getting something like a COA. So therefore, you could kind of judge that the CBD was a little higher, the CBG was a little higher, some of those things a little higher. But I literally had some growers up there say, look, I got this I just have a crop that's got a lot of CBD in it. You want it? And I'd be like, of course. And I was getting, like for a dime on the dollar, I was getting highly laden CBD keef from growers in the Bay Area. I won't talk about what I did with it, but, I was able to utilize it. And I live on the East Coast. But, and I was looking for that because way back when I first started in really using cannabis myself as a medication or as a medicine, I knew and had read about what the federal government had done in 2002, giving itself a patent, recognizing that the minor cannabinoids were as important as the THC. And, way early on in my struggle with MS, I was consuming a considerable amount of very heavily laden CBD. I think some of that has a lot to do with how well I've been able to deal with it throughout the last 20 years.
You know what? I've watched a family. I had an uncle who was the oldest reigning priest in the Bay Area, 50 years, and he had Parkinson's. And my family are all cops or lawyers or priests, Catholic family. And I went to all my uncles and I said, if you let me give him CBD, he's going to have remarkable relief. This was years ago, and they finally relented. Yeah, and he had such a positive reaction, but he was still a little depressed. And I said, if you let me give him this little vape cartridge with a little THC in it, you're going to see that works well too. And they finally did. And when he passed away, my cousin, who was a retired cop, came and said, Timmy, we got told the wrong thing about cannabis, because 3 days until Bill lost consciousness, he was holding on to that vape pen. And I watched him dance with that, and I watched him live with Parkinson's. And here was a Catholic priest who was living a comfortable life as he passed on. And so that was a really remarkable thing for me to see. And so I've spent a lot of time advocating for the medicinal side because of my illnesses. I've worked with dozens of cancer patients. I advocate for that. We spend a lot of time at the Emerald Cup educating and advocating for that. And there's no need for so many people to suffer like yourself who can get access to good cannabis.
Well, Tim, you and I echo the same. Again, it's like preaching to the choir. It's so good to know that the Cannabis Cup is doing as much, not only in raising the awareness level of education among the growers and those who are producers, as they are trying to raise the educational level of the consumer and getting them more educated about. Because I think, I've been saying this for years. Education is as important as location is to real estate, for cannabis. And what do you feel about the way the industry has been approaching that in the last couple of years? I feel as if, unfortunately, we spend too much time in the B2B mode than we should be in the B2C mode, especially now.
Well, I think, unfortunately, with legalization, the medicinal side, it's all, like I said, it's all medicinal, but in the actual dedication to illnesses, it really took a beating because it wasn't easy to get on the shelves. Most of the bud tenders don't have any education in the medicinal aspects. And so you see a lot of companies that were strong on the medicinal side, Rosette Wellness and many others, that took a real beating after legalization because there wasn't a real niche in there. We need to just open up cannabis so it can go into the normal stores, into the health food stores, into everywhere, not just on the phony hemp side that they've kind of created to make that work, but on the real medicinal side, because THC needs to be in the cannabinoid formula a little bit to make it work. We all know that. And so it can't just be all cannabinoids. And so we need a lot of work on that. We need to really fix this because it's a broken system and the patients aren't getting the medicine they need.
Are you preaching that a lot now at the cannabis at your Emerald Cup?
Oh yeah, I've been going up against everybody ever since legalization. I was part of the first advocacy for legalization when we sponsored our sheriff's debates up here in Mendocino County in 2006. Before any state had gone legal, we got Tom Allman elected. We created the first program in the country where you could grow 100 plants legally with the sheriff's permit. So I've been advocating for legalization ever since then. I was part of the Richard Lee original initiative, and I was part of Prop 64. So I've always been there to advocate, and I was really excited about that, except I'm not excited about the fact that Gavin opened up large-scale farming 2 months into legalization and that they pushed the medicinal aspects of cannabis down so far that it's really, like I said, hurt the industry.
Yeah, and it's very interesting, though, that even with the politicians, preaching from their choir, it just seems to me that the industry would, especially now, would start to look at itself and say, well, you know what, we've missed the boat a little bit. I mean, I think businesses and some of the growers out there need to start educating themselves about what the needs are of the consumer. I mean, why does the pharmaceutical industry go after the consumer before they actually go after the businesses? That's the reason why we see, you turn on your television, excuse me, and you'll see, 15 ads an hour on some new drug that, you never heard of. And the reason why is because they want to get the consumer talking about it enough to go into the doctor's office to ask for it. And the doctor's office, of course, he's got a little bit of them sitting right behind him in these samples. And then that's how he convinces you to go out and buy that sample. So it's like, I don't understand why we haven't caught on enough to recognize that there's something we can learn from that industry.
Well, we've been set up and slaughtered. I mean, Obama hired Melinda Haig to run the federal attorney's office out here. And she was the former head for the pharmaceutical companies as their main attorney. And she came in and just beat down on us for 8 years. We got into legalization. But this has never been about having us thrive. If you look at it, I mean, back in the Mississippi, at the University of Mississippi, they were studying cannabis back in the 50s. They knew all about the endocannabinoid system before Raphael McLellan did from Israel. But they never wanted us.
But we started funding Raphael.
I know, but they never wanted us to be happy. They knew about the endocannabinoid system for 30 years and never mentioned it to us. We had to discover it ourselves, and they've demonized it ever since because they didn't want us to be healthy. I mean, at the end of the day, this is about our government has never wanted us to be healthy, and cannabis is the most key ingredient to our health, along with organic, clean food.
Absolutely. So, I mean, just if you had to not put a crystal ball on, but looking at the industry right now, farmers and businesses are facing some really big challenges in this space. What are some of the key issues that you are seeing specifically for small to mid-sized growers and operators, and what needs to change?
Look, I came in and advocated for legalization. I went up against a lot of people. I promised Gavin Newsom I would, our governor. We got legalized, and I've taken nothing but flack from people because he opened up large-scale farming 2 months in. We had 12,000 brands at the time of legalization. There's less than 1,000 left. They have bankrupted 11,000 brands, and I spoke from our stage during the awards ceremony last year and said something that nobody could answer. And it's like every other industry that was started in the video industry, tech industry, wine industry, you name it. The people that started that industry were all worth $50 to $500 million. I said, name one cannabis company or person that's worth $25 million. And nobody could. They basically wiped out our culture and community more in 7 years of legalization than they did in 60 years of chasing us as outlaws because they hated us so much. So we were so busy being wiped out, we could barely fight any of them because we were just trying to survive all the taxes and regulations and restrictions they put on us. So this has been a complete destruction and extinction event of our community, starting in California.
And when you take a look at him, and that's what I've been saying, preaching the same thing. I'm telling you, I just don't. But I think some of this, as much as it is the government that's doing this to us, we are doing this to ourselves in some ways. I mean, there are so many people who get in this business, and then the first thing they want to do is go buy a boat or a car or a pretty house before they actually spend the time growing that business into that $25 million business. I mean, looking ahead, what do you see as a future for cannabis, both here in the United States and globally? And especially when I say globally, you take a look at around the world. I mean, there are a lot of places around the world that are going to leave us in the rearview mirror.
Well, you got to go back, first of all, and say that, I was one of those people. And most of us that started out, the 12,000 brands, did everything we could to satisfy the government. We had to, in the mountains, we had to deal with fish and game, water boards, building departments. We had to go back and regulate all of our stuff. The average person had to spend $400,000 to even get legal. There was no way. Looking back at it, the best thing anybody could have done 8 years ago was suspend their brand, wait 8 years and start now so they wouldn't lose the millions of dollars most of us did. So that was a complete setup, and we had no real chance to see that coming. That was just a blindside. As far as where we're going to go, I've told everybody, when cannabis became legal in California, the rest of this country would fall and the rest of the world would fall. And that's what's happened, along with psychedelics. So now you see the whole world opening up, and we're going to have to quickly change our policies in this country, or we will be left behind because they're taking over the world with cannabis everywhere because they're not restricting it like we are. I believe
look at South Africa. You look at South Africa. You look at Colombia. You look at China. China's got this huge burgeoning hemp thing. It's going to drive the world crazy. And then, they don't have the ability to grow as well as we do in Northern Europe. So they're still, but we're not allowed to export. So that's the reason why Canadian cannabis is doing so well in some places around the world. Are you optimistic about where we're headed?
I'm very optimistic because once cannabis went, you're now seeing psychedelics follow it, and there's nothing that's going to stop what's happened. We're having a worldwide revolution right now, and nothing's going to stop that with cannabis. Our government tried as much as they could. The same people with the DEA that have kept this out for the last 60 years have basically been still trying to demonize it, and Biden's people still were. But the rest of the world has gone by us, and we're going to have to catch up, or we're going to be left in the dust because, like Kennedy's already saying to all these FDA and all these farmers and everybody, he's not going to let them use the chemicals. We're going to have to go back to hemp because it doesn't need any of the chemical uptake or, the energy that, cotton and the rest of it does. So we're going to have to evolve, and we're going to have to evolve very quickly. And I really have a lot of hope Robert Kennedy will help lead us to that.
So you think I was looking at some information recently, and I think even today, this morning, they were talking. I think the vote for him is going to go through, and we'll probably air this after that vote is finalized. But do you think he's going to get approved?
It's going to be a close call. You're watching the complete military-industrial complex, New World Order. We all grew up with different names, whatever you want to call it, going back to Eisenhower. This group of people that don't want us to eat healthy, that don't want us to have access to good cannabis, that don't want us to prosper, they're up against it right now because Kennedy getting in is going to wipe them out. And so is Kash Patel, the FBI director, and so is Pam Bondi. Once they get in there, it's the end for all of them. So I pray and hope and know that he will get in there, but this is a battle that's going to go down to the wire.
And, when you look at that, do you think he's going to try to push this president into the direction of doing something? Everybody's talking about how great the idea of rescheduling is, which I think is just an abomination. What do you feel about if rescheduling, descheduling? We reschedule, we are getting ready to see another 20 years of suppression. Why? Because they reschedule, they have to open up some office with a whole bunch of people who never believed in cannabis to begin with, who are going to now be the overseers of it and try their best to see how easily and quickly they can squash what's going on. Because again, right now I had products in the Massachusetts area. I had to change my contract manufacturer up there. So I'm in the process of relaunching, hopefully in Massachusetts soon, but I'm in Georgia. And Georgia is a very interesting state. Georgia passed a cannabis law that doesn't allow for any smokable or vaporable cannabis, you know, or edible cannabis. You know, you say, well, how are you going to consume this? Well, they don't consider a tincture an edible. They don't consider a lozenge an edible. Okay, so we've had to not play a game, but had to literally work with them. And every single individual SKU that's introduced in Georgia has to go through a review process before they allow you to sell it. So, you know, we have a product in Georgia, one of the only ones in the entire state that is a product that has, we call it a melt rather than it's not a gummy. We call it a melt. And because it's kind of shaped like a Hershey's Kiss, and though we have to call it cacao rather than use the other word for it. So because it's cacao, it's not that other word. That means it's not edible. You know what I mean? So we've had not play these games, but we've literally had to come up with a product that is really a very, very efficacious product. You know, it's got a mixture of terpenes and a mixture of both THC and CBD together in a single small little kiss kind of way that you put in your mouth, you let it dissolve, and that by dissolving that way, it literally is probably one of the fastest onset oral products that I've ever used myself. And we've come up with this, and we're in the marketplace right now, and it's doing very, very well. However, you know, we're going to battle over the next year or so to see if they will allow for some sort of vaporable product. And
But we
so,
shouldn't be battling. Yeah, we shouldn't be battling. We shouldn't have those regulations. We've had to change our packaging 5 times because they made us alter the way it was done. This is how they do to slow us down. They hurl these bricks in front of us to make us go through all these hurdles and hoops to just try to do something. It's got to stop. That's one thing. This regulation has to stop that way. We've got to get common industries. Trump went against DeSantis in Florida and said that they should reschedule cannabis down there.
and
I'm with you.
then he used. I'm in Florida, and then he used our tax dollars to fight against cannabis legislation, and that's why I lost. I mean, he spent an inordinate amount of money trying to, you know, convince people that this was the worst idea in the world, and we only ended up with, you know, with 55% rather than the 60% that was necessary. Though they're putting it to try to get it on another initiative here against his wishes. They're trying to get it put on 2026. And, you know, I got the ballot initiative right out there in my kitchen right now. I'm going to fill it out and see if I can, you know, at least help push the needle the other direction, which it should. But unfortunately, we have some of these, you know, as much as the baby boomer population should be those driving better legislation to allow us to use it. We've got some of those diehards who still believe in that damn egg and your brain on drugs that are the ones that need to just shut up and get the you know what out of the way.
Yeah, well, you know, again, DeSantis is not helping anything. Trump has gone up against him several times. Trump is already for rescheduling, but I believe Kennedy is going to convince him the only way to go is to deschedule. We cannot have rescheduling. We cannot go through 20 more years of this mess. We need to open this up like alcohol right now, make cannabis available in every drugstore and every liquor store and every health food store, just like alcohol. Open it up, let it be free. And then we'll have a really amazing, and that's going to happen. I believe that will happen.
Well, you know,
and
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I agree with you because, again, that Georgia law, which is a strange law, one of the things that they put in the Georgia law was to allow independent pharmacies to carry products. So now you also have dispensaries in Georgia, but you also have pharmacies in Georgia that carry cannabis products, that will be carrying cannabis products.
yeah, I'm telling you what, Trump's going to get rid of the IRS, the DEA, the ATF, the FBI, the CIA. They're going to tear them down. Kennedy's going to get rid of the, you know, all the health people that have traumatized us. And at the end of this year, I've been telling people there won't be any departments left that give fear. There should never be an agency in this country that gives general fear to its people. And when you think about the DEA or the CIA or the FBI or the IRS, they cause fear in people. Well, we shouldn't be fearing our government. And that's what they've created. That's going to end because it's gone on for the last 6 decades and it's over.
And how do you see cannabis contributing to the sustainable development of industries beyond medicine and recreation? I mean, we know that there are 2,500 different uses for the hemp cannabis plant, not just, the consumption of the plant for medicinal or work purposes, but I mean, everything from batteries to building supplies to clothing to you name it is to sustainable fuels. I mean, how do you see if in fact we change the law? How do you see that impacting those areas?
It's going to take over everything. If you look before oil came in here, the rest of the world lived off of hemp for thousands of years. All the clothing, all the sales, all the books, everything came from that. And it doesn't need pesticides to basically grow well. We could just take the whole Midwest and turn it into cannabis and hemp, and we'd clean that whole mess up. It remediates at the same time. So you're going to see cannabis and hemp take its rightful place at the head of the table. They're going to come back to people like you and me and want us to help straighten this mess out because they destroyed it so badly. And people are going to be really amazed at when they see everything they use is going to be hemp in 5 years.
I'm hoping that very soon I get invited to that. You got to get invited to the dance, and I think I might be getting invited to the dance relatively soon because I did. This is a lot of people don't know this and won't. They put two and two together. You can figure this out, but it was back. I'm going to tell you. 14 years ago, 15 years ago, I did 3 shows with Dr. Oz when Oz was on air. And we were the first time that we had a legitimate conversation about cannabis being legal. And it was one of his highest rated shows to date. He had done, 400 or 500 different shows, 600, 700 shows. And those cannabis shows were his highest rated shows to date because we had discussions. And what was very crazy about this is that when those shows aired, we started seeing immediately the polls across the country starting to change. And people went from, 60% against to 55% for, to 40 to 70% for. So, or 60% for. So it was very, very interesting. So I'm hoping that, not only if RFK gets in, and Mehmet Oz gets in, there may be some definite changes coming.
Well, I watched that show. You belong with those people. I do believe you will be invited to that dance, and they're going to find all the people that really were there in the beginning that really should guide and lead this industry and show them how to do it right. Not only with cannabis, but psychedelics too.
Oh, no ifs, ands, or buts. I am a big, firm believer in psychedelics. And again, we're talking about medications that have been in the cornucopia of medications in the world for thousands of years. It's not like this is something that came up yesterday. No, it didn't come up back in 1937 when a couple of assholes decided to team up with their money to make sure they could destroy the planet with other products. I'm talking about Randall Hearst and Charles DuPont. Most people in this country don't even recognize and understand why cannabis was ever made illegal. They don't even get it. They don't even recognize that the clown who really pushed it hard to make it illegal was an asshole who supported cannabis when he was in charge of alcohol prohibition. We're talking about Anslinger. Anslinger spoke around America about how he's never arrested anybody or nobody's ever been arrested for hurting people who were on that cannabis stuff. He didn't call it cannabis. He was that Mary J stuff. Well, but he wasn't against it until he lost his job. Then all of a sudden he loses his job and decides, got to figure out a way to do something. And at the same time, people do not recognize and understand that in America, back in the 30s, back in the 20s, back in the 10s, we were still battling slavery. Even though slavery was repealed, they needed a new re-enslavement tool. And so what was the easy re-enslavement tool to use? Arrest all those darkies because most of them might have some cannabis in their pocket. And why do they have cannabis in their pocket? We've completely erased history, rewritten it, and didn't even explain the fact that a lot of slave owners, especially in the South, near Kentucky, Arkansas, Tennessee, They gave cannabis to their slaves. How the hell do you think you can get a person to go out in the field all day long in 100-degree weather and pick some bullshit cotton? You know what I'm saying? Without giving them something to make them feel as if they had. So there was a lot of cannabis being used, especially you go back and we take a look at newspapers, 1880, 1890, 1891. You look at the classified ads, 75% of all the medications that were listed in the back of the classified ads were some sort of cannabis-based product. There were tinctures being consumed all over America. 1890, 1891, 1892. It wasn't until we figured out a way that we could use this to vilify our entire group of people to allow for more re-enslavement that we passed that dumbass 1937 Marijuana Tax Act.
Oh yeah, you just told it just the way it is. I mean, that's what happened. And they came in and they wiped it out, and all of a sudden it was the blacks and the Hispanics that are doing that, and we're going to take them all out. And then it moved on to the hippies. They just moved right in and got the hippies, and came right. And then they went out to University of Mississippi, found out how good it was, and then they were like, "Oh, we can't have any of this medicine going to these people. These people will be healthy if they get this stuff. We got to demonize the heck out of this."
Correct.
Yeah, it was a masterful thing they did. It was a masterful thing they've done, and that's why they really spent. Look what they did. Biden created the private prison systems. They created the DEA all around suppressing cannabis to make sure that we never thrived. And it's our whole life. But look at us. They went back and they made sure every part of our life didn't thrive since the 50s on. Nothing has thrived for us.
Well, let me ask a question. Well, real quick. First off, give out your stats, please. Announce to the world where people can go if they want to learn more about the Emerald Cup.
Oh, emeraldcup.com. You'll find our websites. We're on all the social media sites. You can look up me, Tim Blake, and you'll find me. And we're here. We help. We educate. We have panels. We do a lot of speaker panels. We do a lot of education. We spend a lot of time.
Well, if ever you need me, please reach out. I'd love to come out and address your audience. And also, if people around the country want to be able to submit product. Now, a lot of growers can't because you can't send things across. You're not supposed to send things across state lines. However, I happen to be working with a group in Georgia, and that group in Georgia has one of those special DEA licenses so that they can actually move things for research purposes. So I'm just wondering if I wanted to submit our melts to the Emerald Cup, how could I do that? Could I do that?
No, you can't yet. We can take in hemp. We have hemp categories, but we haven't got, of course, we haven't got interstate opened up yet. In the next 2 years, this is all going to change. We're going to have interstate. The Emerald Cup's going to be a nationwide competition, and then we'll be a worldwide competition within a couple of years. And this is all going to be even way bigger than it even is now. So it's going to be very exciting, but we have about 2 years to clean this up, and then it'll all be opened up.
Okay. All right. Okay. I mean, I'd even try to figure out a way to get, a contract grower in California or a contract manufacturer in California to make one of my products for you just so I could submit it. I'd have to do that then, right?
Yeah, that's what they do. We do all kinds of collabs and people come in and, it means a lot to win the Emerald Cup. A lot of competition, 320 flower entries, the best judges in the world. We spend a month and a half doing the contest judging. So it's really comes down. If you see the judging process, our judges come in, they're blown away by the length and the detail we go to ensure that the right winners win.
And you do the same thing for edibles, right? You have an edible category.
We do it for edibles. We do it for tinctures, topicals, all the CBD products. It's gotten to be such, they think that we add contests on to make money or something. I've lost more money than I ever made in the Emerald Cup. We do it because people need these categories recognized so we can educate people about even the various types of tinctures or CBDs or different things,
Okay, for sure. Well, Tim, thank you so much, my friend, for being a part of the show today. I mean, I'd love to have you back. So as we get closer and closer, you have a open opportunity whenever you want to come here. Okay.
Oh, absolutely. And we'll talk about a lot of other things that I'm sure you'd be interested in. The UFOs
Sure.
and some of the stuff that's going on.
Well, you know what? Before we go, why don't you hit us with something? Anything else you want to add? Come on now. Jump in there.
Okay. I'll tell you what. The big thing that people are going to realize in the next 2 weeks, because they're going to release the Kennedy assassination files and Martin Luther King, and that's going to tie in the CIA and the FBI and Lyndon Johnson into his murder. And people are going to learn what I've been studying UFOs research for the last 52 years. And in the simplest, shortest way, what we're going to find out is go back and research. William Tompkins was the head of the spy program for World War II for the U.S. He was coming back and telling Eisenhower, the CIA, and everybody that the Nazis were working with psychics and ETs to build spacecraft. We knew all about it because we had Area 51, Roswell, and MJ-12. The crazy thing is they've kept this quiet for 80 years. They were told about underground bases in Antarctica. The Nazis went down there. We sent Admiral Byrd with the largest naval expedition in history to root them out. That's a fact, too. He got blown up by their ships. They checkmated Dwight. He didn't want to do the deal, but MJ-12, the Bushes, the CIA, the elite of the world did, and they formed a partnership. Dwight Eisenhower, a couple of years later, was not allowed into Area 51, so he had a very famous speech about beware of the military-industrial complex because they had gone off and he was no longer allowed into Area 51. He told Kennedy about that. They told Kennedy and his brother. That was the end of it. They took over the world. We have lived in a slave planet of sorts ever since then because they've been controlling us every bit of the way. And at the end of the day, we're going to find out that every reason why we have not thrived for the last 60 years is because they decided when they created the Federal Reserve and the IRS, when they created all that, they were going to basically kind of enslave us as indentured servants, but they weren't going to kill us. When they realized the whole UFO thing, they realized they weren't going to need us. In 1960, they did a big study. And so the last 65 years about preparing to get rid of us. COVID was going to be the final straw. If Hillary Clinton had won, they would have forced vaccinated us 15 times and got rid of most of the people here so they could take over. And that's what we're going to find out in the next 3 or 4. We're going to find out in the next 3 or 4 months. All of that goes back to Eisenhower and the UFOs.
Oh my goodness, my friend, I need to have you back. Come on now. I do another podcast that is called Free Thinking. So, if you want to come on that one, we can kind of do a mixture of both cannabis and the free thought.
I can do it. I've been spending my whole life doing this. I spent 52 years, several hours a day. I'm probably, as a layperson, I know more about the ETs and all this than anybody, that probably most people in the world.
Well, Tim, I got to tell you, if people want to reach out to you personally, where would they go?
They can find me on social media, on Facebook, on X, Blake_Mendocino for Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on all the sites, and I'm kind of spitting this out more and more. I was a little bit quiet over the last few years because I didn't really want to go out there, but I've really been on fire the last couple of months because it's time to just call them out and tell them where it all is.
Speak your truth, my brother. Speak your truth. You be well. You take care of yourself. I can't say thank you enough for being a part of the show today. And again, I will make sure our office reaches out. We'd love to have you back in the next week or so, next couple of weeks, and let's talk about, ETs. Come on now.
And thank you for that show you did with Oz. That was an amazing moment in history for cannabis, and we love you for that. Thanks, Montel.
Thank you, sir. You be well. And you keep tuning in to Let's Be Blunt with Montel. Thanks for joining me on Let's Be Blunt with Montel. Please make sure you're subscribed and hit the bell to be notified when new episodes post each week. We'd love to hear your feedback also, so please send us your comments. Military Makeover is so grateful for the support of Purple Heart Homes, a nonprofit organization that rebuilds and transforms the homes for our veterans.
Our heroes come home with sacrifices most of us can't imagine. As a veteran myself, I've been there and founded Purple Heart Homes to help.
When I tell the story of Purple Heart Homes, it's the freedom to not have to depend on somebody else to do the simple everyday things in life.
Visit phhusa.org/makeover to learn how you can help.